Hi, I'm Femi. Okay. US President Donald Trump's so-called Muslim travel ban marks its third anniversary this week. Trump is now talking about expanding the policy. Is that a good idea? Bad idea? Share your thoughts with us on Twitter or in our live YouTube chat, and you might be in the stream. To date, more than 31,000 people have been denied entry into the US under the travel ban. The Trump administration insists the ban is needed for national security. But in many cases, the policy has had a devastating impact, separating US citizens from their spouses, children, and family. Last week, Trump confirmed plans to add more countries to the banned list soon. Have a listen.
We're adding a couple of countries to it. We have to be safe. Our country has to be safe. You see what's going on in the world. Our country has to be safe. So we have a very strong travel ban, and we'll be adding a few countries to it.
But activists continue to challenge the so-called Muslim ban's legality, and some government officials are planning to introduce a measure to repeal the executive order entirely. Joining us to discuss the ban, Debbie Almuntasa, an activist and academic who's been fighting the policy. We also have Zara Bilou. She is a civil rights attorney and the executive director of the San Francisco chapter of the Council on American Islamic Relations, or CARE. And joining us from Lagos is Yami Kasim. He's a journalist for Quartz Africa. Good to have you here, everybody. Let me just start as a quick refresher and remind us which countries are under the current travel ban so we can see where in the world that we're talking about. So I'm just going to put that image up there right now, and you can see that. And then we're going to go from the current travel ban to what has been widely reported will be the countries impacted by this new travel ban whenever it is officially announced. So now we're going to move on to those new countries. Well, this isn't definite, though, Yummy, but Nigeria is in the mix. These are the new countries under consideration. There is a short list going on right now. Yummy, when you saw this, what did you think?
To be honest, when I saw it, I wasn't that much surprised because over the past year, I've done a lot of reporting about, the stance of the Trump administration with regards to immigration and how that affects Africa and how that directly affects Nigeria. And this felt to me like a natural progression, really, of the events that have transpired since Trump, took office, and how that has related to Nigeria. Just last year alone, Nigerians were on the end of, several visa clamp-down measures. For starters, there was the suspension of an interview waiver program, which basically allowed frequent travelers to the U.S., renew their visas without going through in-person interviews. That was scrapped. Afterwards, there was also a hike of the visa application fees, which meant that Nigerians had to pay more to apply for visas. Aside from all of that as well, there was also there was an evidence, or rather there was swelling evidence, on ground of more stringent application processes, increased scrutiny, and all of that. So it felt to me as though this was building up to, to something like this. And all of the clamp-down measures have already had an effect. Last year, Nigeria had the largest drop-off in visitors to the U.S. globally. So clearly, all of the clamp-down measures have had an effect already. So Nigerians were surprised by this, but it felt to me like a natural progression.
All right, I have to say, Zara, we should all be aware that this is not a definite list. Who knows what the final list will be? But again, when you saw those countries, were you ready for this as a civil rights lawyer who's trying to help people who've been currently affected by the travel ban? Were you ready? Are you ready?
We've been in this seesaw about the travel ban, the Muslim ban, since 2015, which it sounds absurd to even say out loud, December 2015. So more than just the 3 years that it's been in effect, we've been back and forth on the Muslim ban for 4 years. And one of the ways in which the Trump administration has terrorized our communities is with this, is it coming? When is it coming? Which countries? My country, your country? And so some of these countries were surprising. For example, Belarus, right? A European country, which we have now heard rumors that members of the Trump administration are lobbying to have removed from the list. And then some of these countries, as we've talked about with Nigeria, we're not surprising it's a progression. But what has people on edge is not knowing when, who, and how.
Let me just share with our audience some of the hashtags that we're keeping an eye on as we're looking at social and picking up the anxiety there. So hashtag travel ban, Muslim ban, very popular yesterday. There was a lot of action on there. Muslim ban turns 3, remembering the very first travel ban. And then No Ban Act. This is very important. Fireside campaigns suggest the Trump administration is considering adding even more countries to the ban. Urge your representative to not only repeal the ban, but to support the No Ban Act as well. Debbie, you know about the No Ban Act. Tell us more. You're actively involved in it. What do we need to know?
Well, what our people need to know about it is that it is a critical legislation that we need to pass. Congress, as well as hopefully get it to the Senate. It is critical for us to repeal the ban. And this actually is the most instrumental way. So this has actually been ongoing for the last 8 months, where we have actually lobbied and advocated with congressional leaders to sign on. And many of the congressional leaders nationally have been receptive, those who are Democrats. And we firmly believe that we are going to get it to the finish line. And just yesterday, Nancy Pelosi tweeted about it and released a statement, as well as Jerry Nadler, who released a statement. And what they're proposing is actually to mark it up. But we hope that, the No Ban Act will pass as is, because it is solid and it is truly something that will help us as advocates regain our immigration policies that welcome all people, no matter where they come from. And for me, my community, the Yemeni American community, has really been directly impacted by this immensely, where we've now founded an organization called the Yemeni American Merchants Association that has been working aggressively to advocate for families and has been instrumental with the No Ban Act and making sure that our congressional leaders in New York City supported it.
Yeah, let me just bring in Wada Khalid. Wada Khalid spoke to us a little bit earlier, talking about his take on where we are with the travel ban and the pushback. Have a listen.
The House will be voting on the No Ban Act for the first time, and the Judiciary Committee announced that it would be marking up that legislation. So we are finally getting closer to actually voting to repeal this ban and to prevent it from targeting other communities again in the future. But until then, we have to keep advocating and speaking out against it because it is absolutely discriminatory and it is absolutely un-American.
So, Yami, earlier I just shared one of the stories that you wrote about some countries in Africa being impacted by the travel ban. What do you know of any action that they are taking in order to be taken off the list and not be included in a ban like this?
To be honest, in terms of action that's been taken, a lot of diplomatic efforts are with African countries is pretty much reactive. One of the ministers in Nigeria has said they were surprised and shocked with the news. That suggests that there's been no high-level, diplomatic back-channeling going on. And so what will most likely happen is that the ban will first be in place before measures are then attempted to be taken. The interesting thing is, just like Nigeria, other countries on the list as well have had some previous with this administration. Sudan was on the original list of the initial Muslim ban when Trump first took office. Sudan was on that list. After legal challenges, they were taking off that list. Eritrea has also had visa restrictions imposed on them, under this administration. That was in relation to the fact that, according to the U.S. government, they were not quick enough to accept the nationals who were to be deported from the U.S. And so what happened was all Eritrean nationals were disallowed from applying for tourist B visas, which are pretty much the most common type of visa. Yeah. So of the 4 countries to be included, Nigeria, Sudan, Tanzania, Eritrea, 3 of them, Nigeria, Sudan, and Eritrea, have had previous with this administration. So the government really cannot say that, they didn't expect this to happen. The trend, though, is government here reactive.
I think it's also just important to keep in mind, I'm just clarifying. So the Trump administration has said over and over again that they engage in this really thorough process, but they haven't been transparent about what that thorough review process is, right? So we have some details country by country. I mean, Iraq is another example of one that was on, came off. Chad is one that was on and then came off. But in many cases, for impacted people, we get approached by people in our community. Debbie, I imagine this conversation happens for you a lot as well. In California, I will have Yemeni Americans come to me and say, can't we lobby to have Yemen taken off? And I'm like, look, but there's a separate conversation happening between the Yemeni government and Yemeni security state officials and what's happening here, and the absolute lack of transparency and the refusal of the Trump administration to produce any of the documents, any of the guidance, any of the assessments, right? And they've been asked and they've refused and they've fought back in court so that they could maintain that opaqueness, makes it challenging for impacted people and for advocates in the US to say, hey, this is what we can do to support communities to help get their countries off the list.
Let me just insert this, Debbie, before I know you're about to respond here, but it's very busy on YouTube right now. Lots of people have lots of opinions. Let's go to Elizabeth Rainey. You can see her highlighted in orange. The US isn't safe with him. I'm going to say that's President Trump as president. His racism puts us all in danger every day. Elizabeth has jumped straight to racism. She's not talking about security. Zara is laughing. Debbie, your take.
Well, it's comical because this is simply fascism at its best. What we are seeing right now, and it's really ironic that the announcement came at this time of the year. Right, we are marking the 3rd anniversary of the Muslim ban, which Trump wants to trump his base and supporters. This was a campaign promise that he made, and he delivered, and now he wants to expand. This is another opportunity for him to deflect from the impeachment hearings. So he is taking every opportunity to create news, to distract the American public from the important issues. And that's really something critical to know and understand. In regards to, Zara mentioned, Yemeni Americans coming to me and others within the community, especially the Yemeni American Merchants Association, to actually advocate and remove Yemen. And my response has been, I refuse to sit at a table where I am going to admit to this administration that my country is a security risk. It was never a security risk. And when we look at all the countries that have been identified on the Muslim ban, none of them are a security risk to the United States. It has been proven that there is 0 incidents by any individuals coming from those nations. And so that's really critical to understand and see that Trump is just nitpicking and basically focusing on Muslim majority countries to maintain that campaign promise that he made to his base.
Okay, so let me just put this suggestion right here, because we can argue back and forth about security, whether this travel ban is a constitutional ban, but what we cannot argue about is the impact down on the ground with real people. I want to use a little clip here from a Fault Lines episode where it looked at the travel ban and the impact on people trying to relate and reconnect with their families from Yemen. Just one example. This is a mum who is stuck outside of the US. Her son is sick. Her husband is in the US. Her daughter is sick. They cannot connect. This is a little bit of her story. Have a look, have a listen.
يعني في لحظة أنت متوقع إنه خلاص حتبدأ تستقر بحياتك، حتترتب أمورك، تترتب حياتك، ما عاد فيش الأب لوحده والأم لوحدها، في كيان أسري كذا متكامل. الفترة هذه أنا بنحاول قدر المستطاع إن أنا أبعد بنتي على شوي شوي مني، أخليها إنها ما بتدورش علي، ما بتقولش ماما. صعب.
So there are so many stories. I just want to make sure I get that story absolutely correct. It's only the daughter that can travel to the US. She is stuck outside of the US. One of many stories, Zara, when you're trying to reunite families, sometimes you have to go to the worst case scenario in order for them to get back together again. Can you explain what that means?
I always think of young Abdullah Hassan, who our Sacramento office worked with in December of 2018. He was born to a Yemeni American father and a Yemeni mother. When his mother became pregnant, Saudi Arabia had already begun to bomb Yemen, right? So there was a proxy war happening there. Young Abdullah was born with a degenerative brain disease. His family moved, his mom and he moved to Egypt in hopes of safety and better medical treatment, but his condition continued to deteriorate. And through the course of this time, they are making immigration inquiries. They've made the application. They've called Congress. Like, they've done everything that you could to try to bring his mom to the US. And his condition is just getting worse and worse. And so she makes a heartbreaking decision to send her son, Abdullah, almost 2 at the time, to the United States to seek medical treatment. Except when he arrives, it's too late. His condition is beyond repair and he's put on life support. And that was when the hospital contacted CARE and they said, what do we do? We want his mom here for when we have to do the difficult thing of taking him off of life support. And in a matter of just a couple of days, we were able to file an emergency lawsuit. We mobilized in partnership with Empower Change and others, tens of thousands of emails to members of Congress. And as you can see on the screen, we also put together a press conference. We created wall-to-wall media coverage. And all of a sudden, she was granted her visa. And it's not because the decision makers learned something they didn't already know. It was because we forced their hand. And so the reality that we saw in Abdullah's case and that we see in so many of these cases is that you have to be literally dying to be able to overcome the Muslim ban. And the hardest part of that story for all of us is she gets here. Well, she gets here and she's got to take him off of life support. And the hardest part for the advocates, and this is, you know, I don't want to make light of the directly impacted people, but people started to come to us and they said, well, I have cancer or I got married or this. And it's like, well, are you dying enough? Are you dying at the level that Abdullah Hassan was dying at? Is someone on life support? And then maybe you have a shot. But it is heartbreaking that this mother had to send her 2-year-old ahead of her, only so that he could come to the closest part of death alone.
Yes, Debbie, go ahead.
There are hundreds of stories like this, and I can share with you several that have been really heartbreaking for us at the Yemeni American Merchants Association. We had this elderly gentleman who had a heart condition and many illnesses and was trying to get his wife to be with him in his last days, and sadly was not able to get her. And through advocacy work with Congressman Max Rose and a number of other organizations, we were finally able to get her here. But by the time she arrived to New York City, she immediately went from JFK to the hospital. And the woman is suffering with kidney failure. It's just heartbreaking to actually see her in the hospital, frail, and she's lost so much weight, and her color of her skin was so different. And this government does not care about these stories. And it's heartbreaking when we see, you know, client after client coming in, longing for their family members to be reunited. And we need the American public to see this. And, you know, the story of little Muhammad is incredible. And this clip that you just showed us is incredible. We try so hard to get some of our clients to speak to the media, but they're afraid to speak because they think that that's going to create some negative impact on their cases. And so, you know, the opportunity to really shine a light on the impact sometimes is really difficult for our communities.
Yemi, there's a business impact as well, and I really want you to drive this one home because you understand that when you're talking about business on the continent and business in Nigeria that I know that you've particularly been reporting on, the impact on that business when there is something like a travel ban happening. Can you explain what that might be?
Well, that's pretty much multifaceted. First off, one of the key things that has defined Nigeria over the past few years has been the growth of the tech ecosystem here. Over the past decade, the tech ecosystem has grown to become the most valuable in Africa, and that has been defined by young, bright, brilliant Nigerians starting companies, leveraging technology, trying to build solutions that have become attractive enough for global investors to back with millions of dollars. Now, this throws a spanner in the works because the process of getting backed by investors involves meetings in the U.S. where a lot of the venture funds are based. It involves interfacing with U.S.-based professionals. It involves attending accelerator and incubator programs in the U.S. Having this sort of travel ban in place, that pretty much disrupts that process. There are also practical problems for a lot of these startups because due to several reasons, some of them actually incorporated in the U.S., but they then operate, in Nigeria or in other parts of Africa. So in that regard, it's a big problem, or it potentially could be a big problem for the tech ecosystem in this part. Beyond that as well, the real-life applications extend to students or prospective students. In 2018, the economic impact of spending by Nigerian students in the U.S. alone was about $514 million. Every year, thousands of Nigerian students attempt to go to the U.S., to access higher quality education. And I mean, they're going there, they're spending their hard-earned money. They eventually sometimes become immigrants in the U.S. And it's a statistic, it's a fact.
So Yami, let me just put this to you, because Koik is saying here on Twitter, America is way safer than before. Allow Americans to deal with their own domestic problems. No foreigner should add to the burdens of the already existing terror. And then, coming from the White House, the travel ban has been profoundly successful in protecting our country and raising the security baseline around the world. We do not want to import terrorism or any other national security threat into the United States.
It's difficult to see how Nigeria or other countries play into this. It's a tad cruel to imprint certain countries as being national security problems while other countries are not. And it's not a coincidence that the countries that are imprinted as being problematic are, they've got a certain demographic that's been the largest. So it really is a stretch to say that these certain countries pose national security problems. Nigerians in the U.S. are the most educated immigrant group. Nigerians in the U.S. are some of the most productive immigrant groups. If you take a look at what Nigerians in the U.S. have done, that cannot reflect poorly on Nigerians in Nigeria trying to get to the U.S. So it's a long stretch to brand everybody the same.
Sure. Zara, go ahead.
It's also the case. Yeah, I mean, taking one step back, right? America prides itself on religious freedom, period. So our values celebrate diversity, celebrate welcoming your neighbor, and really hold at their core that people should be able to believe and worship freely. This is a Muslim ban. It violates our professed values as Americans. It also, because to the point that there are not threats coming from the countries that have been targeted, it also creates a false notion of security. We're not addressing police violence. We're not addressing white supremacist violence. We are telling our fellow Americans that those immigrants, those people of color, those Muslims, be they the South and Central American immigrants coming across the border, be they asylum seekers, be they Yemenis and Nigerians. We're saying if we just keep all those people out, we will all be safer. But the reality is none of us ever look over our shoulder going, oh, I'm so afraid of being attacked by a Syrian refugee. I'm afraid of being attacked by a police officer. I'm afraid of being attacked by a white supremacist. Let's not get lost in what our core values are at the cost of national security theater.
And we have to understand that, these are white nationalist views, right, that are being perpetuated to actually promote Trump's initiative in creating this, good person, bad person, where immigrants right now are being looked at from that worldview. And it's really, really unfortunate because this country was a country that welcomes all. And I question the person who just tweeted, where their ancestors from. The only people native to this nation are the Native American Indians. Everyone came from somewhere. And his family may have come on a ship without a visa or on a plane. And so we really can't lose sight of that and understand that this country welcomes all.
All right, Debbie, let me just add this. This is Faiza Patel. She's co-director of the Liberty and National Security Program at the Brennan Center for Justice. This idea about national security, she has a take on that. Let's have a listen.
The First Amendment to the United States Constitution prohibits the government from discriminating amongst people on the basis of their faith. But that is precisely what the Muslim ban does, and that is why it is unconstitutional. It has always been clear that the ban was not about national security, but was about creating barriers to Muslims coming to the United States, and that is the impact it has had. It has cut Muslim immigration and travel to the country, and it has kept Muslim Americans away from their friends and family who live in the countries affected by the ban.
Just want to check in one more time on YouTube. Thank you, everybody who's having vibrant conversations there. Looking at Ananias Jones, the biggest threat to US security is domestic terrorism. That debate goes back and forth on YouTube, but we're wrapping it up here on the stream. Thank you to Zara, to Yummy, to Debbie, and to you for watching. I will see you next time. Take care.